Paramount crest, not every marriage dies in a loud, shattering collapse. Some relationships rot from the inside, still wrapped in elegance, still wearing the perfect face for the outside world. Until a truth buried too deep suddenly rises like a corpse floating to the surface. And this time, the thing that could trigger a full-scale earthquake is not an obvious affair or an ordinary fight over money, but a lie that was supposed to stay buried forever. A pregnancy that never existed. When people are pushed to the edge, when every escape route has been sealed off by suspicion, fear, and wounded pride, the most terrifying thing is no longer the secret being exposed, but the moment each person realizes they never truly understood the one sleeping beside them. In this air thick with betrayal, a confession may no longer be a path to redemption, but only the first spark in a war far more brutal, colder, and crueler than Bill, Hayley, and Randy ever imagined. Hayley has lived too long in the trembling state of someone who knows she is standing on cracked glass. At first, the lie about the pregnancy scare was only a tool, a move born out of desperation mixed with ambition. When she needed to bind Bill to a sense of duty strong enough to keep him from leaving and discreet enough to hide her true motives. But lies like that always take on a life of their own. They do not stay still and serve the person who created them. They grow, twist, demand more lies to keep them alive, and eventually come back to strangle the very person who gave them birth. What has begun to shake Hayley is no longer simple guilt. Her conscience, if it still exists, has long been buried beneath too many calculations, too many excuses that she was only trying to survive in a world where the weak are always crushed. The thing that truly keeps her awake is the feeling that Bill has stopped looking at her through the eyes of a husband softened by habit and obligation, and has begun looking at her like a man piecing together fragments and realizing the picture in front of him may be a complete deception. Bill is not the kind of man who explodes the instant he realizes he has been insulted. What has always made him dangerous is not outward rage, but his ability to stay silent long enough for that silence to become a torture chamber. The more suspicious he grows, the less he says. The more wounded he feels, the more tightly he controls every glance, every movement, every question, like a lawyer cornering a witness into the darkest part of the courtroom. Hayley feels that change more clearly every day. It is there in the way Bill no longer argues with her over trivial things, no longer tries to explain himself, no longer gets angry over small slips. He simply watches, he lets her keep making mistakes. And it is that calm that makes Hayley begin to understand that her time is running out. If she still has one chance to reclaim even a shred of control, it has to begin with a carefully calculated confession. But even in that thought, repentance is far from pure. Hayley wants to tell the truth partly because she is exhausted from living inside a performance, but mostly because she understands that the more Bill uncovers on his own, the harsher the sentence waiting for her will be. She has imagined the moment of falling to her knees before Bill many times. Not in the tragic image of a wife truly crushed by remorse, but in the agonizing space between humiliation and self-preservation. Hayley knows exactly when her tears have worked before, which doors they have opened, which walls of cruelty they have softened. But Bill is no longer in the position of a man whose ego can be stroked into mercy. If she begs for forgiveness, he may not see the woman he once married, but the living embodiment of every foolish mistake he made and every moment of arrogance in which he believed he could never be deceived. For a man like Bill, betrayal is humiliating enough, but being manipulated through such a flawlessly crafted scheme cuts even deeper. It strikes at his pride, his sense of control, his belief that he is always the one who can read everyone else. And once that blow lands on Bill's ego, his response will not be merely emotional. It will be strategic. That is why the thing Hayley fears most is not Bill erupting in immediate anger. An impulsive outburst is still something predictable, something that can be dodged, even exploited. What chills her to the bone is the possibility that Bill will simply sit there, letting each confession fall into the heavy silence like stones. and then use that very silence to force her to keep talking. She understands that if Bill becomes to calm, it is not a sign of forgiveness but a signal that he is shifting from the role of betrayed husband into the role of hunter. At that point, the fake pregnancy will no longer be the end point of her confession. It will only be the beginning. Because Bill will inevitably ask something even more merciless. If she could lie about something that enormous, then what else in this marriage was ever real? That question is what pushes Hayley toward the edge of another, even more horrifying decision, whether she should drag Randy down with her. For months, Randy has been both accomplice and shadow, the person she clung to so she could maintain the illusion that she was not completely alone inside the maze of lies. He witnessed her panic, helped cover the cracks, taught her how to adjust the story, and more than once pulled her back from the edge of exposure. But Randy has never helped anyone without keeping leverage for himself. Every time he saved Hayley, he also tightened another link around her neck. And now, with Bill drawing too close to the truth, Randy is no longer safe ground. He becomes living proof that Hayley's lie was not a panicked mistake, but a coordinated plan. Worse still, the truth that Randy is not only her accomplice, but also her cousin could change the entire color of the story. It would turn scattered suspicions into a pattern. It would make Bill and Hayley's marriage look not like an emotional mistake, but like a trap built from the beginning through blood ties, coordination, and clear intent. Hayley is disgusted with herself when she realizes she has considered betraying Randy not because her morality is finally awakening, but because she understands that in a purge like this, the one who speaks first usually has a better chance of surviving than the one exposed last. She begins telling herself that revealing Randy is necessary to end the lies once and for all, but beneath that elegant reasoning lies a naked truth. She is preparing to sacrifice blood for the sake of negotiating her own survival. That realization terrifies her even more, because it forces her to confront her own true nature. Hayley is no longer only afraid of Bill. She has begun to fear the woman she has become, a woman who can cry from guilt in the same moment she calculates who should be thrown into the pit first so she can climb out. As for Bill, once Randy's name moves to the center of the truth, his anger will no longer remain merely personal. It will become a need to restore power. If Bill comes to believe that Hayley and Randy conspired to deceive him from the very beginning, then what is destroyed is not only trust in the marriage, but his entire standing within the web of relationships around him. A man like Bill can endure being hated, opposed, even openly challenged, but he cannot endure the idea that he was played in a long game without seeing it. That is why his first response may not be to tear Hayley apart in an explosion of rage. He may turn first toward Randy as a way of determining the true scope of the conspiracy, testing which lies were born of fear and which were deliberately built to lure him into this marriage. In Bill's mind, everything will immediately shift into the language of battle lines, links in a chain, motives, evidence, and retaliation. But Bill is far too shrewd to believe that the first confession will be the whole truth. On the contrary, the more he hears Hayley speak, the more reason he will have to suspect that there are still deeper layers untouched. The fake pregnancy may be bait. Randy may only be the visible accomplice, and behind them, there may be greed, hidden benefits, financial secrets, or family ties he was never meant to know. Because of that, Bill may choose a strategy that completely destroys Hayley, pretending to stay calm, pretending to agree to sit down, pretending to let her believe that confession is opening a path toward reconciliation, while in truth he only wants to drag the rest of the truth into the open through the sheer desperation of her hope. It would be exactly Bill's kind of cruelty, the kind that never needs to raise its voice yet makes the other person disintegrate because they no longer know at what exact moment they will be finished. Hayley will realize that calm much later than she expects. At first, she may cling to it as a sign that Bill still loves her, still wavers, still leaves a narrow path of escape. But the more she talks, the more she sees Bill not interrupting, not condemning, not throwing her away immediately, the more she will sense something ice cold. He is letting her dig her own grave. At that point, the confession that Randy is her cousin will no longer be a strategic choice. It will become an inevitable fall, because staying silent will only make everything worse. And once that blood secret is exposed, Bill will see their entire past under a completely different light. Meetings that once seemed accidental, Randy's advice, the moments when Hayley drifted and then returned to the exact path she was supposed to follow, may suddenly look like traces of a plan coordinated from the very start. The thought that this marriage may never have begun in love but in calculated manipulation will strike the deepest part of his pride, making whatever pity he still has left vanish. And yet the most dangerous person in this storm may still be Randy. He is not the kind of man who remains loyal to anyone long enough to go down quietly with them. If he discovers that Hayley has sold him out, he will not retreat in silence like a defeated man with dignity. A man like Randy lives by knowing other people's weak points, by collecting fragments of information he never fully shares, by always keeping a knife in reserve to sever whoever needs to be cut loose. Hayley knows that too well, which is why every time she thinks about speaking Randy's name, it feels like she is striking another storehouse of explosives. If Randy truly holds evidence that could destroy not only Hayley but Bill as well, then this confession will not be the ending. It will only be the opening gunshot. He may know things about how the marriage began, about hidden deals, about money, about who encouraged Hayley from the start, or worse. He may know enough of Bill's secrets to drag him down from victim to someone just as stained. And so the situation slowly turns into a three-dimensional game in which no one is clean enough to stand fully in the place of the innocent. Hayley may be the one trembling the most, but she is not blameless. Bill may be the one deceived, but he is not entirely innocent of the conditions that allowed such a marriage to take shape. Randy may be the one pulling strings from the shadows, but he also carries the bitterness of someone raised with a sense of deprivation. Someone who learned that weakness only gets you crushed in this world. That is why every decision from here forward is stained with both justification and malice. Hayley does not confess entirely out of remorse. Bill does not investigate entirely out of pain. Randy does not strike back entirely because he has been betrayed. They are all fighting for survival in their own way. And that is what makes this confrontation no longer a simple matter of right and wrong, but a raw collision of ambition, pride, blood, the hunger for control, and the terror of being devoured. When she is finally driven into a corner, Hayley will be forced to understand that no confession is pure enough now to redeem her. Every truth she offers is already contaminated by how late it comes. If she says the pregnancy was fake, Bill will ask why she is only saying it now. If she reveals that Randy is her cousin, he will ask what else is still being hidden. If she swears that at some point her feelings were genuine, even she will no longer be certain enough to believe her own words. The most tragic thing is that Hayley may still care for Bill in her own distorted, selfish, dependent way, but once the truth comes out, those feelings will no longer carry any power to prove anything. All she will have left is the image of a traitor begging to be seen as human. And in Bill's cold world, that may not be enough. After everything, Bill will not easily let Hayley walk away in peace, but he may not destroy everything in one instant either. What fits his nature more logically is to keep her close, not out of love, but out of control. A legal wife trapped beside him, living each day in uncertainty, may be a far subtler punishment than a dramatic expulsion. Bill may choose to turn their own home into the place where Hayley pays, little by little, day by day, through deliberate coldness, invisible restrictions. The constant feeling of being watched and slowly stripped of every ounce of agency. But that choice will also carry the greatest risk. Because keeping a woman like Hayley too close after every illusion has collapsed is not only revenge. It is also the cultivation of a new source of chaos. A desperate person, stripped bare, isolated, and left with no path out can become more dangerous than any accomplice waiting outside. And that is the point where the real storm may finally begin. Because if Randy realizes that Hayley betrayed him in order to carve out a path to survival, he will not let her face the consequences alone. If Bill realizes that his marriage was built on a deliberate fraud, he will not stop at punishing the two people in front of him, but will hunt down every hand involved. If Hayley comes to understand that Bill never intends to forgive her and is only keeping her close to break what remains of her pride piece by piece, then she may transform from the victim of her own lie into someone willing to do something even more reckless just to avoid being crushed completely. At that point, Fairmont Crest will no longer be witnessing an ordinary marital crisis, but the collapse of an alliance disguised by a wedding, rings, and vows that may never have had a soul. The fake pregnancy will be only the first shard of glass to fall. After that will come the hidden blood tie. Then the real motives. Then the secrets Randy still holds. And finally, the cruelest question hanging over all of them. Was there ever a single moment in this marriage that was real? Or from the very beginning was everything only a performance that lasted so long that all three of them forgot when they had first started playing their roles?